Hey Libra, I don't know why, but this love reading already feels incredibly emotional. It feels like someone is finally starting to realize just how deeply they've felt for you this whole time, and why the distance between you never truly made them forget you. This person misses your energy. They miss the peace they felt around you. They miss the way everything once felt so light, so genuine, like love hadn't yet been touched by fear or complicated thoughts. But the question that keeps coming through so strongly here is, why did they stay silent for so long? Why would someone with feelings this deep choose to keep everything locked inside instead of saying it out loud? There's something about the way this person sees Libra that feels very rare, gentle, hard to replace. The kind of person who makes them start thinking about love more seriously. And at the same time, that realization may have scared them more than they expected. Because sometimes, when people come across a connection that feels this sincere, they honestly don't know how to hold on to it. And honestly, I think that's exactly the energy showing up so strongly in this Libra reading. Sometimes in life, people keep going through their normal routines, answering messages, laughing with other people, trying to keep everything looking perfectly fine on the outside. While deep down, there's still one person who instantly softens their mind every time they're remembered. Not in an overwhelming or chaotic way, just peaceful, like finally finding a place to breathe again after a long, noisy day. And it really feels like someone has been thinking about Libra in that kind of way lately. The Two of Cups here doesn't feel overly dramatic to me. It feels more like a very gentle connection, but one that reached this person emotionally much deeper than they expected. They miss the way you listen to them. They miss how, around you, they didn't feel like they had to become someone else just to be accepted. They didn't have to force themselves to seem perfect. They didn't have to wear so many emotional masks. And maybe Libra isn't the kind of person who always says the biggest, most extravagant things. But there's something about your energy that makes people feel understood in a way that's actually pretty rare. And sometimes, those peaceful connections are the ones people end up carrying in their heart the longest. I keep picking up on someone replaying the past over and over in their mind. Not necessarily because they're trying to force everything back to the way it was, but because they're starting to realize the feeling they had with you was genuinely different. The Six of Cups carries this energy of memory, old emotions that seemed buried for a while, but never truly disappeared. Maybe recently this person passed by a familiar place, heard an old song, or had one of those very ordinary moments that suddenly brought Libra back into their mind. And what seems to confuse them isn't the fact that the memories are still there. It's the fact that, after all this time, the feeling of you still feels soft, not heavy, not bitter, not emotionally chaotic like other relationships they've experienced before. Just peaceful enough to make them quietly wonder, why did I walk away from something that made me feel this emotionally safe? I think this person may have spent a long time surrounded by complicated connections, always trying to read people, always feeling emotionally guarded, always expecting love to come with tension or uncertainty. So when they met Libra, someone calm, emotionally balanced, gentle, and thoughtful, they honestly didn't know what to do with that feeling. Because sometimes, the more peaceful love feels, the more it scares people, especially when it starts softening defenses they've carried for years. And not everyone is ready to let someone see their real emotions that clearly. It almost feels like this person once believed love had to be intense, passionate, emotionally extreme in order to feel real. But the more life they've gone through, the more they've started realizing what they were actually missing was peace, the feeling of being next to someone without their mind constantly being on edge. And that may be exactly what Libra unintentionally brought into their life. What's interesting is, I don't really see this energy as rushed. It doesn't feel like someone forcing things to happen immediately. It feels more like emotions slowly unfolding inside of them over time. Like this person is beginning to understand that not everyone can calm your heart simply through their presence. And not everyone can make you feel loved without making you feel like you constantly have to prove your worth first. Maybe that's what they miss most about Libra right now. That very quiet feeling that somehow stays with a person long after everything else has gone silent. And the deeper I go into this reading, the more it feels like this person isn't only remembering Libra anymore. They're starting to look at themselves differently too. There are periods in life when people just keep moving forward without ever really stopping to ask themselves how they actually feel. Everything moves too fast. Work, pressure, relationships that come and go. And little by little, people get used to staying silent with their own emotions. But honestly, it feels like Libra unintentionally slowed something down inside this person. Not through huge words, not through dramatic moments, just through your presence. There's something about Libra that makes this person feel like they can't keep avoiding themselves the way they used to. The Judgment card here feels like a very quiet, emotional awakening. Not the kind of transformation that happens overnight. More like someone slowly opening their eyes after spending years living in survival mode, emotionally protecting themselves from everything. I keep seeing this person reflecting on so much lately. Old relationships. The times they stayed silent instead of speaking honestly about their feelings. The moments they pushed people away simply because they were afraid of getting hurt first. And what seems to confuse them the most is, out of all those memories, Libra is still the person who brought them the deepest sense of peace. It almost feels like this person once believed love always had to involve control, tension, or constantly trying to stay emotionally guarded. But Libra came into their life very differently. You didn't try to hold on to them tightly. You didn't pressure them to open up before they were ready. You didn't make them feel like they had to become someone else just to deserve love. And sometimes that kind of softness makes a person realize how exhausted they've become from constantly protecting themselves emotionally. The Hermit card here carries a very withdrawn energy. I think this person has been spending a lot more time alone lately. More quiet moments, more reflection, less distraction from the noise around them. And inside those quiet moments, it feels like they're finally hearing their own emotions more clearly than before. Maybe they've been asking themselves things like, why did I walk away from someone who made me feel emotionally safe? Why did being around Libra make me want to get closer and run away at the exact same time? And honestly, I don't think people are always afraid of love itself. Sometimes they're afraid of being truly seen. And Libra has this way of making people feel deeply seen without even trying to. Not because you're analyzing them, but because your energy makes them feel like they don't have to pretend anymore. And that's beautiful. But for someone who still carries unhealed parts inside themselves, it can also feel incredibly vulnerable. The Hangman here feels like a pause, an emotional standstill. Like this person has reached a point where they can't keep looking at love through the same perspective anymore. Old beliefs about love are beginning to shift. The way they see themselves is changing too. And maybe the hardest part for them right now is accepting that their feelings for Libra have been much deeper, for much longer, than they originally allowed themselves to admit. This doesn't feel like temporary curiosity anymore, or feelings that appeared briefly and disappeared. It feels like a connection that never fully left, even through all the silence. And I also think this person is beginning to understand something important. The distance they created before may not have been because Libra didn't matter enough. If anything, it may have been the opposite, because sometimes people run the hardest from the connections that genuinely touch their heart, especially when they still don't know how to face the unhealed parts of themselves. And the deeper I look into this energy, the more it feels like there's still a quiet fear lingering between these two people. It doesn't feel like the kind of fear that's obvious enough to name right away. It feels more like the kind of energy that keeps pulling someone closer, only for them to quietly pull away again. And honestly, I think Libra has probably felt that before, the moments when this person seemed so close, so gentle, so ready to open their heart, and then suddenly became distant again, almost like they were trying to hide something inside themselves. The Seven of Swords here doesn't really make me feel like this is a completely dishonest person. It feels more like someone who spent years hiding their emotions, hiding sadness, hiding vulnerability, even hiding the fact that they truly need someone sometimes. I think this person has lived for a long time feeling like they had to emotionally protect themselves from everything around them. And when someone stays in emotional survival mode for too long, they eventually start believing that opening their heart is dangerous. So instead of speaking honestly about how they feel, they stay silent. Instead of staying when emotions start getting deeper, they create distance. There's also this feeling that this person has always been afraid of being judged, not only by family or the people around them, but by themselves too. I keep seeing someone who tries very hard to appear emotionally stable on the outside, but deep down, there's a lot of insecurity they've never really talked about. And maybe what makes them the most nervous around Libra is the fact that you can feel those things, not because Libra tries to dig into them, but because your energy is naturally very intuitive. You notice emotions people are trying to hide. And for someone who still hasn't fully learned how to love the imperfect parts of themselves, that can sometimes make them feel like they're somehow not enough. I think that's also why the hot and cold energy feels so strong in this connection. There are days when they want to be very close to Libra. They want to say everything. They want to feel understood. But then almost immediately after, fear pulls them backward again. Fear of rejection, fear of being seen too clearly, fear that if they truly open up, they'll lose control over their emotions completely. The Nine of Swords feels like the kind of thoughts that keep someone awake for hours in silence. And honestly, I don't think this person is nearly as emotionally calm as they pretend to be. It feels like they've asked themselves many times why their feelings for Libra still feel this strong even after trying to create distance. Maybe they tried convincing themselves this was only temporary, something that would eventually fade with time. But the more they tried to ignore it, the more they realized the feeling never fully disappeared. And I think what makes this especially difficult for them is that Libra doesn't feel like anyone else they've met before. You don't pressure them to prove themselves. You don't try to change who they are. You don't compete for attention. Libra's energy feels more like a very quiet mirror. And sometimes, that silence becomes the exact thing that makes someone finally see what they've been avoiding inside themselves for years. It almost feels like this person once believed that if they stayed distant long enough, their feelings would eventually disappear on their own. But instead, the silence only made them hear their heart more clearly. And maybe now, they're beginning to realize the problem was never truly this connection itself. It was how deeply afraid they were of facing their own real emotions. And as that fear slowly starts softening little by little, it feels like this person is also beginning to change the way they see love altogether. Some connections enter a person's life not to create chaos, but to make them want to treat themselves more gently. And honestly, I think Libra carries that kind of energy in this reading. Not in a controlling way, not in a way that pressures someone into changing, but in the kind of quiet presence that naturally makes a person want to grow. The King of Pentacles here feels very different from the energy showing up earlier in this reading. This no longer feels like emotional avoidance. It feels more like someone beginning to ask themselves, if I truly want to hold on to a peaceful connection like this, then who do I need to become? I think in the past, this person may have approached love in a very temporary emotional way. If the feelings were there, they moved closer. If they felt overwhelmed, they went silent. If they got confused emotionally, they disappeared for a while. But Libra seems to be teaching them something deeper than that. A meaningful relationship can't survive on intense emotions alone. It also needs stability, presence, trust that lasts long enough for two people to finally feel emotionally safe with each other. And what feels especially important here is, Libra never forced them to become that person. You didn't try to fix them. You didn't try to prove you were better than anyone else. But the closer they got to your energy, the more they started realizing there were parts of themselves that still needed healing and growing. It feels like this person spent a long time simply trying to manage life, working, maintaining appearances, keeping everything under control. But deep down, they never really knew how to create lasting peace inside themselves. At least not until Libra entered their life. Because your energy didn't just make them feel loved. It made them feel like maybe life could actually feel softer than the way they'd been living it. The Magician here feels like someone slowly realizing they really do have the power to change themselves. No longer blaming circumstances. No longer hiding emotions through busyness or distance. But finally looking inward and asking, who do I actually want to become in this connection? And honestly, the more time they spend away from Libra, the more clearly they seem to understand the value of this bond. Not in an overly dramatic, you don't know what you have until it's gone kind of way. More like the distance helped them recognize how different Libra truly feels compared to other connections in their life. Some people gave them temporary excitement. Some pulled them into intense emotions. But very few people ever made their mind feel calm after a long day. And I think that's what this person is beginning to understand now. Libra doesn't only bring romantic feelings into their life. You bring companionship, understanding, the feeling of being allowed to exist without constantly needing to stay emotionally guarded. And it also feels like this person is slowly learning to see love in a more mature way now. No longer asking who's more right, who has more control, who's less emotionally affected, but instead, how do two people stay honest with each other without hiding so much of themselves? And maybe for the first time in a very long while, this person genuinely wants to build something deeper than temporary emotions. But even with all of this emotional growth, it still feels like there's a very intense inner conflict happening inside them. It almost feels like one part of this person has finally started understanding how deep their feelings for Libra truly are, while another part is still trying very hard to keep everything under control. The Lover's card here doesn't only feel connected to romance. It feels more like an internal choice, a moment where someone can no longer keep living separated from their own heart. I think this person became very used to making decisions from a place of emotional self-protection. If something felt safe, they chose it. If something made them feel too vulnerable, they pulled away. If emotions became too deep, they tried to act like it didn't matter that much. But the problem is, the more they tried to downplay this connection, the more impossible it became to escape how they truly felt about Libra. It feels like they once believed that if they stayed busy enough, distracted enough, eventually everything would fade on its own. But real emotions rarely disappear that way. They usually stay quiet somewhere in the background. Until one day a person becomes still enough to hear them again. And honestly, I think that's exactly what's happening to this person right now. The Judgment card showing up again makes this feel like a very deep emotional awakening. Not everyone experiences a connection that forces them to completely rethink the way they love. But Libra seems to have done that for them. Maybe for the first time, they're beginning to understand that love isn't always supposed to be about winning or losing. The person who loves less isn't automatically stronger. Keeping distance doesn't necessarily protect someone from pain. Sometimes, the more emotionally mature person is simply the one brave enough to be honest about what they feel. And I think that's exactly the lesson this person is slowly learning now. The Chariot here carries a really interesting energy too. It feels like someone standing between two different paths inside themselves. One path is continuing to live the way they always have, maintaining the same image, avoiding anything that makes them feel emotionally out of control. But the other path quietly keeps pulling them back toward Libra. Not loudly, not forcefully, just in a way where the harder they try to move in another direction, the more they realize their heart keeps returning to the same place. And honestly, I think there have been nights when this person has asked themselves questions they never allowed themselves to face before. What do I actually want? Am I really protecting myself? Or am I pushing myself away from the very thing that could make me happy? Because it feels like they're finally starting to understand that some connections can't simply be replaced by meeting someone new. Not because Libra is perfect, but because feeling completely like yourself around someone is actually very rare in this world. And I think what weighs on them the most is knowing there were moments when they tried to pretend this connection wasn't that important. Maybe they stayed silent for too long. Maybe they acted like none of this affected them. Maybe they created distance just to feel like they still had control over the situation. But the more emotionally mature they become, the more they seem to understand that denying feelings doesn't make them disappear. It only makes the heart more exhausted. I also feel a very deep shift happening in the way this person sees emotional fulfillment now. It feels like there was a time when they placed many things above their own heart. Other people's opinions, their public image, all the things they thought they were supposed to do. But now, they're beginning to realize that a life without genuine emotional connection always leaves an emptiness somewhere inside. And maybe Libra is the person who finally made them face that emptiness honestly for the first time. But even though their heart is becoming clearer now, it still feels like there are many things this person hasn't fully found the words to say yet. And the deeper this person begins to understand their own emotions, the more seriously they seem to think about Libra now. This no longer feels like feelings that only appear during lonely moments or passing nostalgia. It feels more like someone quietly asking themselves, if I ever truly slowed down one day, where would I actually want to return to? And honestly, Libra keeps showing up in that thought with a feeling that's very close to home. Not just attraction, not only chemistry, but the feeling of finally being able to breathe easier around someone. The Two of Cups here feels much deeper now than it did earlier in the reading. At first, it felt like a connection they simply couldn't forget. But now, it feels more like emotional harmony they want to hold on to long term. I think this person may have experienced relationships where everything always felt like work. Trying to be noticed, trying to be chosen, trying not to be left behind. So being around Libra may have been the first time they felt like they didn't have to fight in order to be loved. You never made them feel like they had to become a perfect version of themselves just to deserve staying. And for someone who spent years living under emotional pressure, that kind of softness feels deeply healing. The more emotionally mature they become, the more they seem to realize they don't actually need a connection that only makes their heart race for a few intense moments. What they truly need is someone whose presence makes life feel calmer. The Ten of Pentacles here carries such a strong energy of stability, not only material stability, but the feeling of having someone they could genuinely build a life beside. Someone who makes the future feel less lonely when they imagine it. And honestly, I think that realization is what confuses them the most right now. because it feels like they never expected themselves to want a love this gentle. But Libra is making them long for very simple things. A peaceful conversation at the end of the day. Someone who understands their silence. A place they can return to without wearing so many emotional defenses. And what feels most beautiful about this connection is, I don't think they see Libra as just another romantic relationship. There's something deeper here, almost like being around you brings them closer to the most honest version of themselves. No pretending, no needing to appear strong all the time, no constantly maintaining a perfect image, just being allowed to exist exactly as they are. And I think that's why the distance has made them understand Libra's value even more clearly. Because sometimes people only realize how healing someone's presence was after that presence becomes quiet in their life. And it also feels like this person has started thinking about the future more seriously now, not in some unrealistic or fantasy-driven way, more like quiet, honest thoughts, such as, if there's one person I'd want beside me through the ordinary years of life, it might actually be Libra. And maybe what they were searching for all along was never perfection. Maybe it was simply the feeling of being understood, without needing to explain every part of themselves. And Libra seems to have touched the softest part of their heart in a very natural way. But even though their feelings have become much deeper now, it still feels like this person is standing at a very important moment between silence and finally facing what's truly in their heart. It feels like this person has been quietly observing for a very long time now, not always showing up directly, but still paying attention to Libra in their own quiet way. Sometimes it's as simple as unconsciously searching for your energy in the middle of an ordinary day. Sometimes it's lingering a little too long on a photo, a song, an old memory suddenly returning once everything around them becomes quiet enough again. The Page of Swords feels like someone who still hasn't completely stepped out from behind their emotional walls, but they also can't pretend they don't care anymore. I think this person kept their distance for long enough to finally understand what they truly feel. And the quieter everything became, the more they realized their heart was still moving toward the same place. There's a very noticeable shift happening in their energy now. This no longer feels like complete avoidance the way it once did. They're no longer immediately running from emotions the second things begin feeling deeper. The reversed hangman feels like someone finally wanting to step out of emotional limbo after staying there for far too long. Like they're exhausted from constantly standing between two choices. Exhausted from always wondering, what if, while never feeling brave enough to face the real answer inside themselves. And honestly, I don't think what's changing here is only their feelings for Libra. It's also the way they see themselves when it comes to love. It feels like this person is slowly realizing that opening their heart isn't weakness. Being honest about emotions doesn't take away their value or their sense of control the way they once feared it would. The Ace of Swords brings in this very clear feeling of emotional clarity. Like after going through the same emotional cycles over and over again, they can no longer deny what their heart has known for a very long time. And I don't see this as reckless or impulsive energy at all. This feels like someone who has spent a long time thinking, reflecting, sitting with their emotions quietly. And now, they're finally beginning to want to live more honestly with what they feel. Maybe they still don't know exactly where all of this is going. Maybe there are still fears hidden deep inside them. But at least now, they don't want to run from these emotions anymore. And honestly, I think that's the biggest shift in this entire reading. Not huge promises, not dramatic gestures, but a person who used to be deeply afraid of emotions, finally wanting to face them with more honesty than before. I also feel the reconnect energy very strongly toward the end of this reading, but not in a rushed or forced way. It feels more like two people who have gone through enough silence to finally start seeing each other through a more mature perspective. Maybe in the past, both of them misunderstood each other's silence. Maybe they thought distance meant the feelings were gone. But sometimes, certain connections need time before someone fully understands the value of what they're feeling. And with Libra, I think the most special thing about this connection is that it never truly disappeared from this person's heart. It simply stayed quiet until they became still enough to hear it again. And maybe right now, this person is no longer learning how to run away from love. Maybe they're finally learning how to stay with a feeling that genuinely brings them peace. And maybe that's really what this reading has been quietly touching on the whole time. Not every deep connection comes into our lives to turn everything upside down. Some people enter softly, with nothing more than a gentle presence, and somehow they still change the way we see everything, the way we see love, the way we see ourselves. And sometimes, even the empty spaces we've been carrying inside for a very long time. I think Libra carries that kind of energy in this person's heart. Not loud, not trying to stand out, just the kind of presence that makes someone, after years of emotional exhaustion, finally want to be more honest with their own feelings. And maybe the most beautiful part of this connection isn't necessarily about where it's going. Maybe it's about the way these two people unintentionally helped each other grow through love. One person learning how to listen to their heart more deeply, the other learning how to stay soft without losing themselves. And honestly, sometimes just finding one person who truly understands you in a world full of noise already feels incredibly rare. I also don't feel like this reading is trying to rush anything. It feels more like a quiet reminder that real emotions often need time before they fully make sense, especially for people who've spent most of their lives emotionally guarded. And maybe all of us at some point have experienced a connection like this. Someone who didn't make our heart feel chaotic, but stayed in our soul for a very long time simply because of how peaceful they felt to be around. And honestly, I'm a little curious. Have you ever met someone whose presence alone made your heart feel lighter? And if you enjoy readings that are a little softer, a little deeper, and emotionally honest like this, you're always welcome to stay here with this channel a little longer. I'll still be here, slowly sharing tarot stories for hearts that are learning how to love more sincerely every day. And maybe some of the most beautiful connections in life are never the loudest ones. They're the people who leave your soul feeling calmer, long after the conversation has already ended.